So today's focus is what can we do to optimize our brain and emotional wellness right now? What are the things going on in our lives at home, at work, at play that inadvertently may be dramatically influencing our future brain and emotional health? Well, as promised, today we're going to be looking at 10 different depression triggers. Actually, we're going to be looking at more than 10, but I want to make sure I deliver at least 10 during this hour of presentation. We're going to be looking at how food in particular affects brain health and therefore our emotional health. We could spend easily the whole hour just on that topic alone. Something that really needs a lot of our attention today is recognizing that there are many undiagnosed or underdiagnosed or improperly diagnosed medical conditions that have a huge influence on our mental health, on our emotions, on our mood, on our neurologic health in general. Many people go through life thinking that they are doing great in one area over here, but wondering why they always have problems in this other area, only to find out 20 or 30 years later that if they just spent a little bit more time looking at this other area they thought was okay, they could actually solve the problem that they were struggling with for so many years and even decades. So we're going to be looking at undiagnosed medical conditions. What is it that we can do right now? What is it that we can ask our doctors to look at right now to help us solve some of these puzzles of mental health? And then looking at natural solutions for memory loss. We are in an epidemic of Alzheimer's disease in the United States. In the last 10 years, there's been more than a doubling of Alzheimer's. There's been a quadrupling of cognitive dementias. And we expect that that's actually going to continue to exponentially increase. And so that's one reason this is such a critical topic. We're all at risk. Every one of us has risk with regards to brain and emotional wellness. And then how can we change sad into glad? The last time we met for dinner with the doctor, I suggested that I had a lot more to discuss with dealing with prevention and management of cancer. So, as promised, I'm going to show you how these interrelate. And you remember, those of you that were here may remember this story, the initial story that I told you of my mother, who was diagnosed with brain cancer when I was 10 years old. And how that diagnosis changed my life. In fact, it had a very big impact on my life. Not only did I not have the opportunity to be raised by my loving biological mother, but that experience shaped me. It shaped my thinking. It gave me opportunity to explore why these things tend to happen, and what is it that we now, with the additional insights of modern medicine, can learn and act on in order to limit those risk factors. I mentioned that I hadn't picked up on the fact when I was young that my mother was going through depression. She was going through some emotional traumas. And I believe now, looking back and having had a chance to interview my father and talk to her brothers and sisters, that there was undiagnosed conditions in her life. That if she would have been able to address those specifically, not only would have she experienced life at a much higher level, emotionally and physically, but she very well could have foregone that eventual diagnosis of a terminal cancer. So, what are the things that can influence this whole pathway? The beauty of lifestyle and nutritional medicine is that when you apply it, you're not just getting the effect that you applied it for. In other words, let's say you're trying to get your cholesterol under control, or your blood sugars under control, or your weight under control. And so you apply these principles, and now you start achieving that benefit, but the real value is not that you got the cholesterol under control. The real value is not that you got the blood sugars or the weight or whatever else goal you may have had. The real value is the serendipitous benefit where your body's actually healing in those areas that are really, really important for you. It's healing in those areas that are part of that genetically inherited condition that sets us up for premature disease and death. You know, we all have that. We all have some type of genetically inherited conditions that sets us up for untimely disease and death. But here's the good news. Just because we have that gene doesn't mean that we're determined. Doesn't mean that disease and premature death have to occur. That setup will only manifest itself if we're not aware of the triggers and how we can actually turn off those genetic triggers. So let's just jump right into it. Okay, what are the genetic triggers? What are the things that activate our risk for emotional and brain-related conditions? Neurologic diseases, emotional, mental health concerns. The very first one, I think, is the most pivotal thing. And those of you that have frequented dinner with the doctor should already, at least subtly, know what the answer to this. Now, some of you in the front row already know the answer to this question. Okay, the most important. What is the most important of all the triggers? You can look at it from a negative standpoint, things that we're not doing, or you can look at it from the positive view, things that we are doing. Okay? So what is the category that is the most important to our emotional health, our physical health? You could even say spiritual health. I struggled with this when I was in high school. I was actually thinking about this. Which is the most important? Now, it is an academic argument because we don't want to walk away saying, okay, out of the 10 items that we discussed today, I'm going to pick this one item and that's what I'm going to champion. And because I do that so well, it's going to make the difference. It's going to help me hit that tipping point where my body heals. Is that the way it works? We are not here to choose one out of all. We're here to bring together, to integrate all the strategies that have been provided to us through science, through the book of nature, to understand what it takes to reach that tipping point to actually achieve healing. So as you're thinking about this, I want to suggest to you that our sleep patterns is really the most pivotal of all. Sleep patterns. If I want to improve my emotional health, if I want to improve my mood, if I want to increase the opportunity to experience joy, real joy and pleasure in my life. See, when we're talking about emotional health, we're talking about experiencing joy and pleasure. Okay? Not just short-lived, but long-lived. Joy and pleasure. Satisfaction. I can't get the words out of my mind, those immortalized words by the Rolling Stones. And you know what they are. I can't get no satisfaction. No truer words were ever spoken by people who recognized by the lifestyle that they chose, it did not bring satisfaction. It did not. It might have brought fleeting joy and fleeting pleasure, but the overall impact was what? Depression. The overall impact was depression. In fact, it was said of Marilyn Monroe that the only time she was happy was when there was a camera pointed at her. Isn't that sad? I mean, we know, most of us know kind of the rest of the story, that her life was a very troubled and tortured life, that she was depressed and did not have joy and pleasure in her life. She was seeking it, but she did not find it. She wasn't looking in the right places. Okay, so sleep. Let's talk about sleep. As I looked at all the different triggers that we're going to look at, including nutrition and exercise and other factors that we're going to discuss. And I asked myself the question, what actually sets me up to be more likely to participate and take advantage of all the other healthy strategies? What is it that actually gives me the energy and the power to control myself against those cravings, those desires, those addictions that so easily beset us? Okay, what is it that actually helps us go through a day and be successful and make good decisions throughout the whole day? And I want to propose to you that if we are not making good decisions with regards to our sleep habits, it's going to be very, very difficult to get through the next day, to get through the next week, to get through the next year without making serious, serious mistakes. It sets us up to make a lot of mistakes. Even with the very best of intentions, we are going to make mistakes unless we address this question. We've talked about it before in other contexts. The circadian rhythm, the most powerful factors in our lives that reset our lives, that reboot that computer, that hard drive, if you will, and get it working properly again. That begins with a healthy bedtime. Now you might be saying, whoa, wait a minute, time out. Okay, I'm a night owl. If you're saying that, you're in good company. Okay, because a lot of us are. I'm the same way. A lot of us find that we don't actually start living until about 11 o'clock at night. You know, the rest of the day is just drudgery. But by 11 o'clock, the lights come on. Woo, we're feeling good. You know, and finally there's some joy in our lives. And why would anybody in their rational mind want to go to bed even before the joy begins? Okay, I get it. In fact, that's a classic sign that there's a problem with depression. When the only time we experience joy is late in the evening. See, what we want to do is turn that around so that we're experiencing joy and pleasure and satisfaction throughout the entire day. Where we can wake up early and go, wow, I'm so glad I woke up early. I feel so good. So is that what happens in our lives? And when we wake up, are we actually jumping out of bed and going, okay, I got all these things I need to do, and we're looking forward to that day? I'd like to suggest if that's not what's happening to us, then we need to rethink our plan. And the whole point of this comprehensive series that we do at our clinic on optimizing emotional and brain wellness is to actually develop a plan for ourselves, okay, based on all the discussion and information that we've put together. Develop a plan that works for us. Develop a plan in an objective, thoughtful manner that then we implement regardless of how we feel. So tomorrow morning, when it's time to wake up and I don't feel like getting out of bed, I don't start negotiating with myself and say, well, should I really get up? I don't really feel like getting up. What's going to happen if I start negotiating with myself? I'm not going to get up, right? That's just human nature. I'm not going to do it. But if I get up because it's part of my plan, and I've already previously made that decision that I'm going to get up, okay, now I can go on to the next step and add synergy to this overall plan. So it starts with sleep. So let me just go over a couple of the scientific principles of what makes this work. There's many studies showing that the hours right before midnight are twice as powerful in helping the body heal as the hours after midnight when you're asleep. Okay, so most of us, if I just told you, you really need to go to bed by 10 o'clock, you'd go like, no, right? I don't want to go to bed by 10 o'clock, so you need a really good reason. I would want a good reason too. Okay? And so it's understanding first and foremost that there's a plan, that there's a benefit by changing the time frame of our sleep. So most of us think, as long as we get at least 8 hours of sleep or at least 7 hours of sleep as adults, we're good. So we assume it doesn't really matter when we go to bed and when we wake up, as long as we get those 7 hours. That is not scientific. That is just simply not true. Okay, so that's probably the most important thing we're going to learn. One of the key principles that we're going to learn this evening is that it's not so much the amount of time that we get in sleep as the actual timing of that sleep time. Okay, so the every hour that we sleep before midnight, okay, within reason, within 2 to 3 hour time frame, okay, which relates to the dark and light cycle. So once the sun is down and it's dark outside, there is something that's changing inside the brain chemistry of our body. And being asleep in a darkened room stimulates the production of melatonin, which is that fix it and rejuvenate hormone that we discussed last time, as a powerful anti-cancer hormone. And so the same things that are actually powerfully helping prevent emotional or neurologic problems are also very powerful and primary in preventing and helping the body fight the battle against cancer. Okay, so that's an important principle there. And so for most of us, there would be a benefit going to bed roughly, sometime around 10 or if not before, and then getting up early, getting up at 5 instead of sleeping in. And that actually dramatically improves our productivity. I was recently talking to a college student who is doing amazingly well in her wellness program. And she, like many other college students that I talk to, raised the question. So I'm starting to recognize that there's a little bit of a dilemma here. Is I'm exercising daily. I'm on a really good nutritional program. I'm improving my health in so many ways. But all that has changed her understanding and her perception. She has this higher perception now of what is good for her and what is not good for her. And she's just intuitively recognizing that staying up till 2 in the morning studying for an exam isn't really healthy for her. So we talked about that, how that helps the overall healing process, and we worked out certain strategies so that actually going to bed earlier and then getting up much earlier than she would have ever imagined could dramatically improve her grades, her neurologic health, her body's potential to continue to heal in a powerful way. And it reminds me of a story that Dr. Neil Nedley told, in fact, his book, Dealing with Depression. A very powerful book. Overcoming Depression is the title. He tells the story of that one quarter in school. In fact, we were classmates. We were in college together at this time. He was taking 4 science classes at the same time. Okay, so that's pretty. His pre-medicine advisor said, Neil, this is probably not a good idea. You're going to sacrifice one of your classes for the other. He says you've got too many science classes together. These are hardcore. So he basically had 4 science classes, and each one of those classes had a 4-hour lab. So he was just studying all the time. You know what he did? Rather than staying up and studying late like most people would who are in a very accelerated academic program, he actually had studied the physiology of sleep and how it relates to memory and ability to do well academically, scholastically. And so he decided he was going to go to bed at 9 o'clock every night. Ooh, that must have taken some significant discipline, right? To go to bed. I got all these things I got to study and I got to test tomorrow. I'm going to go to bed at 9 o'clock? Wow, that's tough. But he'd get up at 3. He'd get up at 3. Bed at 9. Remember, what's the power of every hour before midnight? It's worth how many hours after midnight? 2. So he was actually getting a lot of rejuvenation. So the equivalent of 9 to 3 in the morning, that was worth how many hours? That was worth actually 9 hours of rejuvenating sleep in terms of the circadian rhythm and the physiology of sleep and healing and memory. He ended up not only passing all 4 classes, he got top grades in every class. And now he's a well-known internal medicine physician. Okay, so that's the first step, sleep. You see, the day begins when the sun goes down. So you cannot, if you do not make good decisions when the day begins, you can't hope to make good decisions during the remainder of the day. So start the day by making a good decision and getting to bed at a reasonable hour. And that's tough. That can take weeks to develop. Because I know many of us struggle. And so all these other strategies that we're going to discuss this evening will help you follow that strategy as well. Why is it that so many of us struggle with getting to sleep? Well, there is an exercise that is very, very effective in helping us get to sleep early. Guess what that exercise is? Exercise. It is exercise. You were thinking the exercise accounting sheet or something like that. No, this is... So the reason the brain can't shut down, so many of us, we're so overwhelmed with life, there's so many things happening in our world, in our home, at work, and so forth, is that the brain stays active, right? It's just working overtime. It's trying to process, what do we do next? The brain cannot relax unless the body relaxes first. And the body can't relax until it has been exercised. Okay. So this is a very important principle. We've mentioned previously that the very first sign of cognitive dementia, the very first sign that the brain isn't functioning the way it should be functioning, is not memory loss, is not a fatigue or a mood problem. The very first sign is weakness in our muscles. Weakness in the large muscles of the body. And it's that type of weakness that makes us more likely to fall, break a hip. Okay? It's that type of weakness that has actually been going on for decades, already influencing our brain activity. So we must have a good exercise program. It's been said that if we're not exercising a minimum of 30 minutes a day, collectively, it doesn't have to be all at once. It can be 10 minutes after breakfast, 10 minutes after lunch, 10 minutes after dinner. Now, why did I choose after each meal? Those of you who've been following this Dinner with the Doctor series recognize that light exercise immediately after the meal is one of the most powerful ways that we have available to us to not only exercise our muscles, but to improve digestion, to improve the absorption of minerals into our bloodstream, to improve blood flow to the brain, okay, to control blood sugar fluctuations, to keep the blood sugar from going as high after the meal, and therefore to keep the blood sugar from going as low a few hours after the meal. So light exercise right after meals, very powerful in influencing not just overall health, but especially brain health. I remember an elderly lady who in her 80s had come to my high school in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and was giving a talk at our General Chapel Assembly on the importance of fitness. And she was up there doing all these exercises, and they had introduced her as to be the oldest lady who had ever climbed Mount Whitney. And so I was kind of impressed. I was a freshman in high school at the time. I was impressed by this older lady, and she was doing push-ups on the stage. I was like, are you kidding me? And then she was doing these stretches, and she actually challenged several of us to come up to see if we could actually do the things that she was doing. And none of us could actually do everything that she could do, because she had a plan that she followed every day, and she stayed very nimble, very flexible, and her legs were strong. I remember going up and talking to her afterwards, and she asked me my name. I was just nobody, little freshman, right? And she asked me my name, and I told her, and she says, I know your parents. She's sharp. She was sharp. She told me a story I'd never heard, where my parents had actually gone to La Sierra University, just south of or north of this here, and had met there. And my father, after coming back with his parents from India, his parents were missionaries in India. They were poor missionaries, right? They were getting, after decades of being overseas as missionaries, now we're looking for start a new life with their 6 children, getting them through school and college. And it was Hulda Crooks and her husband, Dr. Crooks, who taught at Loma Linda University in the area of the anatomy department. They actually helped set him up in one of their houses. And so it's interesting how there's so many interconnectedness. It was just really neat talking to her. And then about 5 years later, I'm now at Loma Linda University in my professional training there. And one morning, early, before 7 o'clock, I was rushing up to the top of the hill, the old sanitarium, where they still hold classes. And I heard clanking on the fire escape. So I looked up the fire escape to this 4-story building. And there was Hulda Crooks, 95 years old, taking these steps, these big fire escape steps, 3 at a time, just lunging up those fire escapes. And I remember I was late to class, and I just stopped. I just looked at her for a few minutes. I was just amazed at how nimble she was, how flexible she was, and how powerful her legs were. It was later that I found out she was in training. She was in training to climb Mount Whitney and Mount Fuji. She had that next year. She was the oldest person, not just female, but oldest person to have made it to the top of Mount Fuji. Have actually climbed the entire mountain in Japan. Boy, the media in Japan have a heyday. They revere their elderly there. They just were so impressed with Hulda Crooks. Well, if you wanted to hear the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, she had grown up a sickly, out of shape, obese young lady, had gone to college, had pneumonia, had never really fully recovered from her illnesses. And in her mid-50s, she found herself more and more depressed. And as she got into her mid-60s, her depression worsened because the love of her life, who she was going to travel the world with after his retirement as a professor at Loma Linda University, died from a congenital heart defect. Gone. So now she not only had all this history of medical illnesses and metabolic problems and depression, but now she was lonely. She had lost the love of her life. And so that threw her in a very severe state of depression. A week or so after the death of her husband, a friend came over and said, "I've come to spend the morning with you." It was an important gift that her friend was giving her. She says, "But I'm not going to just sit here and have us look at each other." She says, "We're going to go on a hike." So hold that thought for a while. She didn't really have a lot of energy, but she thought, well, I can't think of any good reason not to. She didn't really want to, but her friend was there, and she wanted to defer to her friend on that, so they went for a walk. On that walk, she started experiencing something that she hadn't felt for years. She actually started feeling a little bit of joy. Have you ever woken up and not wanted to get out of bed and not wanted to do anything, but something, maybe a friend, maybe a spouse, maybe one of your children, something got you out of bed, and then you ended up going outside for a reason? Even if it was just walking to the mailbox or taking the dog out for a short walk, and all of a sudden you start feeling some joy. You're outside, you're moving your body, you're in the fresh air, and you're getting some sunshine. That's not a mistake. That's not just something that happens. That's real. Okay? Being outside in a bright light and fresh air is one of the most powerful things that we can do to reset that circadian rhythm. Okay? So the first step in resetting our hard drive, if we're struggling with emotional or brain wellness of any kind, is to make sure that we're getting to bed at a reasonable hour. The next thing is to make sure that we're getting up early enough so that we can get outside and get bright light, get exposed to that bright light, the sunshine outside, fresh air, and get some exercise. We can get all those three. By the way, those are three key triggers right there, that we can get them all at the same time. So one of the goals is we want to get at least a half hour of exercise a day. It doesn't have to be all in the morning, but we do need to have a minimum of a half an hour of bright light therapy every day. And this is something that most of us miss out on. Unless we happen to be already doing something like gardening or already being on a walking program that automatically gets us outside, or maybe taking care of the horses, or being outside and doing something with agriculture. Unless we're already involved naturally in those things, most of us, 90% of us, are not getting that minimum 30 minutes outdoor activity in bright light. Now, bright light doesn't mean middle of the day necessarily. Bright light means the sun is up. Okay? So any time between the sun comes up and the sun goes down, that's bright light. And that type of bright light is significantly brighter than any indoor light, however bright it might seem to you. And that's therapeutic light. That's what we need. So what Hulda Crooks found is that she started exercising with her friend every day, going on little hikes. And she felt so much better from day to day. Now, it can take up to 7 to 10 days before that really kicks in for some of us. In other words, don't give up on it if you don't feel some joy the first few days. Okay? Make sure you do it every day. And within 7 to 10 days, you can start noticing, for most people, significant benefits to the sense of satisfaction, joy, and pleasure that we're deriving from a normal day. I hear many people say to me, says, I have no idea why I'm so depressed or so anxious. I have no idea. My life's great. I don't have any reason for this. Okay? And so what's neat about these natural strategies is that by following them and integrating all these together, we get the synergy. Now we start experiencing joy and pleasure and satisfaction in things that had always been there. Isn't that what we want to find? Being able to experience joy in things that had always been there, we just couldn't extract that from that experience. So from doing this day after day, she started walking higher up into the foothills of the Sierras. Pretty soon she had a lot of time on her hands, she started going for day hikes. And to make a long story short, by the time she passed away in her late 90s, she had climbed Mount Whitney over a dozen times. She had, Congressman Lewis had actually named one of the peaks next to the Mount Whitney after her name. And anybody who hiked Mount Whitney during that era and they saw her, they knew immediately that that was Grandma Whitney. She's in her 90s. Yeah. So exercise can have a powerful impact on our emotional and brain wellness. It is improving oxygen to the brain. It is improving the flow of nutrients to the brain. It is drawing those minerals and taking them to the central nervous system where they're so desperately needed to activate enzymes to turn on the enzymes of joy and satisfaction and pleasure. See, God has placed all those enzymes and neurotransmitters there to have an impact on us. See, our job is to figure out how to optimize them naturally. So she completely reversed her depression with adding exercise to her overall plan. It was, for her, one of the key missing ingredients. Just a few years before her death, I had the opportunity, along with several other professors at Lomond University, to be part of the team that actually tested her fitness status at our Human Performance Laboratory at Loma Linda. We actually set her up in this metabolic cart. She's on this huge treadmill. She's wearing this contraption over her head, hooked up to her mouth. We were analyzing all the oxygen coming in and all the carbon dioxide coming out. And we made her walk on that treadmill until she said, "I quit. That's enough," right? We took her to maximal exercise output, her VO2 max, we call it. And do you know that at 90 years of age, before she climbed Mount Fuji, right at 90 years of age, her VO2 max, her fitness status, was as good as the average 60-year-old. And she hadn't even started exercising until she was 65. So never think that it's too late for you to start a comprehensive wellness program. Never think that it's too late for me. You know, I've let this go too long. Never think that it's never too late to optimize a program. And her story is a very important example of that. Number 3, digestion. Someday we're going to do a whole talk just on that because it's such a powerful and important topic. But to suffice it to say, if our digestion isn't working properly, we cannot extract the nutrients from even the healthiest foods and turn that into healthy blood. In order for us to be healthy, we have to have a healthy circulation. And we're not going to have a healthy circulation if we don't have those nutrients from a good digestion going to the organ systems and especially to the brain to allow optimal health and healing. So digestion is important because if you're not digesting those nutrients, you're getting malabsorption and therefore malnutrition. And I believe that the most common cause of any disease or dysfunction in our lives has to do with a deficiency. Something's missing. You can apply that principle physiologically, you can apply it psychologically, you can apply it spiritually. Okay? It's not so much taking something out of our lives as important as it is to make sure that we have the right things in our lives. And then that actually displaces the bad things. That's what we want. Okay? So suffice it to say that make sure digestion is working right. And let me suggest that most people with a digestive problem have no clue. I get in my practice the people who know they have a problem. Okay, at least if they come for that issue. Oh, my digestion is really bad. I need to get that fixed. But the other 2/3 of patients that I get, eventually we come around and start looking at digestion. At least half the time, there is a subtle unrecognized maldigestion that is of number one priority in their health. Okay, so consider that. The fourth issue, the fourth trigger, is the importance of breakfast. Not having breakfast, of course, is a big theme for today, right? And Karen Houghton, our naturally gourmet chef, she is going to be outlining for you in a little bit during our dinner section how important breakfast is and how good it can taste as well. But let me give you a quick synopsis of why breakfast is so important. There's been research done at UC Davis and also Harvard Medical School by Dr. Michael Murphy, who has shown that children who rarely get breakfast but then are put into a program where they often get breakfast have a dramatic turnaround in their tendencies to hyperactivity, to anxiety, and to depression. In other words, these two studies and others like them at the schools of the public schools in Baltimore and Philadelphia also ran similar studies, and they found exactly the same thing. And they even found that once the children got breakfast, they did much better on the critical thinking skills. They did much better on math scores. But their ability to concentrate went way up. Their hyperactivity went down. Their depression and anxiety dropped significantly. Those are just a few of many powerful studies suggesting that if we don't start our day with a really good breakfast, we're setting ourselves up. That's a hit. That's dramatically increasing our tendency towards challenges with brain and emotional health. Another factor is, as we're moving now into the fall and winter season, is what's called seasonal affective disorder. I know individuals who have moved their family from the Midwest to California because they could not handle the seasons. As soon as the fall came around, depression just set in. And it wasn't just a mild depression, but significant family-altering depression. So being in an area, in a climate that has access to more bright light throughout the year, very, very therapeutic. But let me tell you, I see patients right here in California on a daily basis who are prone to seasonal affective disorder. Just slight changes in exposure to light and sunlight in particular have a powerful influence on emotional and brain wellness. Hey, it goes to the ability to concentrate and to do well in school. I have individuals that come through the series just because they want optimally peaking their mental performance. They want to be sharp in their executive position. They want to be sharp at work, and they want to do the very best that they can with the brain that we have. So seasonal affective disorder suggests basically one thing. We're not following the earlier strategy that we outlined, which is a minimum of 30 minutes in bright light every day. For individuals who work in Alaska, there are light rooms every so often in the cities and towns where you can go and sit in this hot 10,000 lux bright light room and get exposed to bright light for about half an hour. And if you don't do that, it's almost guaranteed that your mood and your emotions will suffer. And therefore, every aspect of your life will suffer, including your tendency towards premature medical conditions and cancer. There's been studies showing that when we get the bright light sometime during the day, especially first thing in the morning with our exercise and fresh air, that makes us sleep better the next night. Because you can't produce melatonin in the dark unless you first stimulated the ability to activate melatonin through bright light. So we optimize that process by integrating those strategies. Other factors that we've already alluded to, and I'll call this number 6, is just loss. Whether it's loss of a loved one to death, loss of a job, loss of a house, having to move to a new area, loss of our friends, not being in the same school. Children frequently can become depressed because they have to leave their friends behind and start all over again. A traumatic time of lives, just giving birth to a child can be very traumatic physically and emotionally, and that sets up many women for postpartum depression, okay? Which means that there are some deficiencies that we need to replace if we're going to fix that right away. It's not just a question of time. It's a question of time well used, applying the right strategies. There's the trigger of chronic conflict. And so that's why it's so critical that we don't let a day go by. As the Apostle Paul says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Don't let a day go by. Don't let that sun come down today until you have at least attempted to reconcile a challenge, an interpersonal conflict with another. If we all followed that key principle strategy, it would dramatically lessen the stress on our lives. And this is physiological, chemical, oxidative stress on the central nervous system, on our hearts, increasing our risk for cancer, and so many other problems, simply because we didn't take the time to reconnect and say, I'm sorry. Or we didn't take the time to say, hey, we've had a rough time the last few days. I just want to let you know that I want this to work out. And I forgive you. Okay? And please forgive me. Okay? If we are willing to do that, it's such a powerful, powerful way to restore the healing potential of the body. Number 8 is addictions. And it's not just addictions to alcohol, addictions to drugs, addictions to gambling, addictions to pornography, but we all have some type of addiction in our lives. We all do. In fact, that's what sin is all about, right? It's just the addiction. We're all addicted to sin in one way or another. Okay, and it's not until we find a way around that, it's not until we accept forgiveness into our own life that we can get rid of that daily addiction to whatever it might be. Whatever our challenge is, and it can be food, it can be TV, it can be trying to dominate others in conversations. We have all kinds of little addictions that are very dysfunctional, and they create challenges in our lives. So finding a way around addictions. Let me suggest to you that if you can think of, and every one of us can kind of think of what that addiction might be in our lives. All these other strategies that we're talking about can dramatically increase the potential for us to be able to focus in on that and address it effectively. Find the appropriate solution physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Number 9 is a sense of feeling overwhelmed. Is it just me? I think all of us feel that way from time to time. And anxiety is a huge challenge in our society, and one of the key things there is that we're just overwhelmed. There's just so much going on. And you know what? Most of those things that create a sense of being overwhelmed are good things. Some years ago, I remember taking some time with my family to read the book by Dr. Richard Swanson called Margins. Do you have margins in your life? Is there any room on the page of your life that gives you a buffer? Okay? Or are we overwhelmed? Is that page completely written in? There's no space to carve out a little peace, a little quiet time? When's the last time you said no to something that was really reasonable? something that was a realistic request? Some of us have a real hard time saying no. But in order for us to do the most important things, if we're not taking care of our emotional and brain wellness appropriately, how valuable are we going to be to other people when they really need us? Have you thought about that? Okay? This is in particular a problem with women, because women are so used to doing everything for everybody else, and they come last. Okay? Each of us need to develop our plan, okay, and have a plan that has margin in it, so that we're not overwhelmed by our own plan, right? Because if we're getting overwhelmed by our own plan, then we are circumventing the whole purpose, and healing's not going to take place. Make sure there's margins in your plan, but make sure that that plan gives you the time that you need to grow physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Because if you're not doing that, you're not going to be effective for all those people that you're trying to take care of, whoever they may be. Number 10. Number 10 could have 20 or 30 subcategories to it. And that is illnesses, medical conditions, either diagnosed or undiagnosed or misdiagnosed or underappreciated as to the impact that they might have on our emotional and neurologic wellness. See, many of us have a wellness program that's designed for one part of our body, but we're forgetting that the most important part of the body to have a wellness program that's specifically strategized is the brain and the central nervous system. If we don't have a plan to optimize our central nervous system, we're in trouble, because that command center is under siege today. It's under siege. We need to recognize that. And so we have to have a plan to fortify it against the challenges that we have today. The first medical illness that I want to draw attention to, and I don't have time to address them all because I'm already out of time, actually. let me just run through them briefly. And focus on those things that maybe are less intuitive. First one is low-grade infections. This is a recurring theme in our discussions, because low-grade infections, by their very nature, are undiagnosed the majority of the time. They run under the radar. It's not something that you stay home from and recuperate. It's not something that has any obvious overt symptoms. It's something that can be there in your body for decades and decades, setting you up for all kinds of medical problems, activating whatever gene we may have inherited that predisposes us to some type of illness. So it's different for each one of us. And that's one of the reasons that science hasn't been as effective in making a big point of these low-grade infections. But if you read the medical literature, you will see that low-grade infections are definitely implicated in cancers, many cancers. Low-grade infections are definitely implicated in cardiovascular disease, and neurologic disease, and the progression of dementias and Alzheimer's and so forth. In other words, we need to figure out what do we need to address to fix low-grade infections. And the first thing there that's required is that we have to have the right nutrients coming in so that the body's innate healing mechanisms that were created into us by God, those innate healing systems can now be activated, can now work. It's like Henry Ford has his assembly line, but all of a sudden, a third of the parts are missing. All the workers are there, all the enzymes are there to put them together. Okay, the assembly line is working fine, but it was just missing a third of the parts. You want to drive that Model A with a third of the parts missing? Probably wouldn't be safe. Okay, so the body can't heal itself. Even though it's designed to be able to heal itself unless it has the building blocks, and that's what nutrition is all about. That's why we have to have a diet that is primarily whole, plant-based, natural foods. That's where the nutrients are. That's where the many trace elements and chemicals that are not even nutrients, these chemicals that are in the food that actually can activate the genes to health and healing. Okay, we've been misled for many decades that as long as you have enough carbohydrates and enough protein and enough fat and then a smattering of nutrients, the RDA of the various nutrients, that you're going to be healthy. Absolutely not. There's no way you're going to be healthy long term if you just focus on that rudimentary approach to nutrition. The actual health and healing nutrients come from, let me rephrase it, the actual healing chemicals come from parts of plants that are not even nutrients. You see, we have to get the right foods into our diet if we're going to kick in the optimal healing potential in our body. We mentioned thyroid as we discussed cancer last time. One of the main causes of low-grade infections is the body's inability to activate the energy resources in the body to fight off infections. And so these mild, low-grade infections just fester for years and decades. And the reason for that is a suboptimal thyroid function. One of the most common and undiagnosed causes of emotional and brain wellness problems, including depression, headaches, anxiety. You can name off a whole long list of 20, 30 items, is because of suboptimal thyroid function. So that's a key example of a medical illness that is well known in medical literature, but it's not being taken advantage. Partly because we focus too much on laboratory tests and not enough on good medical decision making. And that could be something that takes another hour to discuss. Autoimmune disease and inflammation. By the way, also dramatically influenced by a suboptimal thyroid. I had a patient just last week who came in. I'd been seeing her for 4 months. She'd come in. In fact, it was a pastor's wife from a church up north had brought her to me and said she needs help. She was working 10 hours a day in the restaurant industry. And she had horrible rheumatoid arthritis. She was on methotrexate and Plaquenil. These are drugs that are known to cause cancer. But there was the only thing that could be provided that could provide any relief to the pain that she was experiencing. After 2 months of addressing all these things we've talked about, really focusing on digestion, because we had found out she had no gallbladder, had been taken out. A big, big problem. And so we fixed that. There's a whole protocol to address that. And then we discovered that there was a subclinical low thyroid function. She'd been chronically constipated for years. Big sign of low thyroid function. We fixed that, and within 2 months, she didn't need any methotrexate or any Plaquenil anymore. And over the last few months since she's been off of it, she has felt perfect, and her energy levels are back. Her life is back, no pain. Okay? It's by paying attention to the synergy of multiple principles that we're outlining. The last thing I'll mention tonight is the importance of coming together, being with family, being with friends, being part of community, being community to each other. Oftentimes, when we are challenged in the realm of emotional and brain wellness, the natural instinct is to withdraw. The natural instinct is just to sit and to not exercise and watch TV and do all the things that kind of hypnotize us into this situation where we're not growing, we're not healing, we're just getting worse. And so it's really important that we take the effort to reach out. and to let people know where we're at, so that they can also help us come together in community. And that's really what Dinner with the Doctor is all about. It's all about community. It's all about getting to know people in our community and sharing and trying to help each other. So socializing, being willing to extend ourselves, to get out of our comfort zone and to share our time with others, and helping others who might have the same challenges or worse as we might have, encouraging them along. The art of being of help to others is a powerful, powerful healing agent. So we've outlined at least 10 major factors, and we'll have time during the question and answer period to go through some of these other issues in terms of memory and so forth. But I ask you tonight as we end to bow your heads with a word of prayer. Father, I just pray that as we've listened to these strategies of optimizing brain wellness, that you will impress upon us what we need to do and how we can put together our own plan, how you can guide us, and others, our friends and family members, can help guide us in putting this plan together to make it effective enough to hit that tipping point so that we can dramatically enhance our emotional brain wellness. So we ask for your guidance tonight, and we thank you for the opportunity to eat together this evening. In Christ's name, amen.